Yeah. So we, yes. So once again, I would like to welcome you all. Those of you are here at least. We are expecting others to join us. So this is our Saturday CSG meetings. And on Saturdays, we have a conversation about the unification of Africa. As we know, currently there are about 55 neo-colonial governments on the continent, and they range from monarchies to what some might call dictatorships. Even as we speak, there is a threat of war in West Africa as the Economic Community of West African States, called ECOWAS, threatens to militarily intervene in Niger to restore Bazoum, who was arrested by his presidential guards. Why? Because he removed democratically elected government. ECOWAS leaders said. But we are aware that when Alan Ouattara of Ivory Coast changed the constitution and installed himself for further terms against the constitution, and about 200 people died, ECOWAS did nothing. And that's a double standards that people are questioning. People are questioning whether ECOWAS has a moral right to go to war over Bazoum in Niger when leaders make mistakes or take actions like Alan Ouattara did. Does nothing about it. So that situation we find ourselves in, that there are 55 neo-colonial governments. Yet Africa is about 1.3 million people. China is more than us. They are about 1.4 million people. And yet the whole of China, 1.4 million people, have only one government. And recently we've seen the strides of China in all facets of their political economy. Africa, we still have 55 governments. What are these governments doing for the people of Africa? Nothing. Maybe some can see what they are doing. I can't see anything worthwhile that these neo-colonial governments are doing for the African people. All across the continent, we have liberal and conservative governments mainly. There are, if I am right in my analysis, no progressive government on the continent. In the 60s, we had progressive governments. As we speak, the conservatives and liberals have taken power, sometimes forcefully, sometimes deceptively, deception, and have occupied the political space, the detriment of progressive forces. There are no progressive. And so on Saturdays like this, we just want to have a conversation ourselves as Africans and talk about the need of Africa into one all-African continental government, and not an all-African conservative government or an all-African liberal government. We want an all-African progressive government. Difference is that a progressive government will spearhead the welfare of the people, because the welfare of the people is the supreme law. There's nothing higher for progressives than the welfare of the African people. And so in office, progressives will make the welfare of the people their supreme law. Every policy discussion, every law, every action, acid test will be whether our people's welfare is being upheld. So on Saturdays, we have a discussion about this. Today we are hearing from our own brother, who will be speaking in about 15 minutes time, who is Brother Fukua. He resides in Ghana, but he's from Central Africa. But he'll be speaking to us on I would say the scourge of secret societies, where you see leaders wearing badges that actually expose their membership of secret societies. And that's not all. He's going to be talking about a broad range of issues as well. But what Brother Foucault's presentation is drawing our attention to is the role of the, I'd call the secret societies or the invisible government. There is such a thing as the invisible government. The invisible government is a government that are not elected. They are dictatorships. They run the world as we understand it. They hide in the shadows because they're afraid of the light. They're afraid of the people. So they hide in the shadows. They try and control elected representatives of the people. And so if Africa is going to unite and form an all-African government, then Africa must understand that it has decided to take on the secret government or the invisible government. So in a sense, that is what Brother Foucault's presentation is going to help us expose so that we understand what it is that we have decided to do. So Brother Foucault will be presenting in another 13 minutes. In the meantime, I'd like to welcome you all. Our own brother, Comrade Pigeon, who is in Kenya, will be sharing today. I will not be sharing as such. I will just be overseeing what is going on and help where I can. Our own brother Pigeon will share. Brother Pigeon is a presidential candidate in Kenya. He wants to help transform Kenya from a liberal conservative state into a progressive state. We love him so much. He's dynamic and forthright and a far-seeing brother. So welcome everyone, both ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. So I shall hand over now to Brother Pigeon so that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Brother Kwame. Hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
Okay. Revolutionary greetings once again, comrades who are in this platform. It's a pleasure to have you today. As Brother Kwame has said, we do have a Saturday class to discuss the unification of Africa and total liberation of Africa and unification of Africa. And in this regards, it's incumbent on us to ensure that we study the methods and of course the tactics of neocolonialism. So we are here today. We'll be discussing on the spiritual aspect and probably what we call the shadow government is all about. Because in order for us to understand neocolonialism, we must understand all its dealings and all its ways in order for us to understand in reality what are we dealing with and to prescribe the best way forward. Previously, we've had a presentation from Brother Coco, who shared with us a review of a book called White Malice in regards to the CIA and also recolonization of Africa. These are also like the shadow individuals and forces that are trying to control Africa. And we are glad enough to open up to understand this. We are still looking forward to have other presentation on the cultural aspect of Africa. And also we will be discussing probably in the next Saturday or the Saturday, the situations in Swaziland. We don't only study, but we want to put our ideas into practice. For example, today's presentation is in line with our consciousness, where we discuss the basic raw materials and the other aspect of the spiritual or water as being the raw material as per Berkeley's or Thales. And therefore want to understand the angles on how the control of neocolonialism through the so-called spiritual mysteries or other powers are controlling Africa. And we do open to this, and we always have, of course, a solution. So it's not just a talk. Sometimes we come up with a solution and we put ourselves into proper research so that we can have a presentation. So we just don't talk, but we talk things out of research and we share our thinking, not opinions. So it's going to be an interactive class today. I know Comrade Foucault is prepared, and I wish that if possible, we will just go straight to have Comrade Foucault to start his presentation in case he's ready, so that maybe later we can now pick up the reactions, maybe after maybe 30 or 35 minutes or 40 minutes as he's prescribed it, of his presentation, we cannot pick reaction and also check on the current situation in Africa in terms of leadership and how can his presentation be applicable to the current situations in Africa and how can we find a way forward. Brother Fokwa is an ordained interfaith Universal Life Church minister in 2014, but he is a cultural, his spirituality is cultural awareness and repatriations ministry. He'll tell us more about this, but above all, he's a Pan-African who is interested to help and understand how we can liberate and unify Africa. He's a researcher and he has done a lot of work in this, and we are pleased to have him. He's a member of our class, and we are pleased to have his presentations today. And if anybody is getting this information wherever you are, wish to join our class, always feel free to contact the numbers in our posters. Go to our YouTube channel, Consciousism Study Group. You can find our link. And in case of anything, just text me or get in touch so that you can join me to our WhatsApp. So we meet every Saturday at 1900 GMT +1, and Thursday is also 1900 GMT +1. So feel most welcome, Brother Fokwa. If in case you are ready, allow me to know, and if you in case there's anything you want to share, maybe you can talk to Brother Kwame. Brother Kwame, I see you haven't put Brother Fokwa to be a co-host so that he can be able to share in case. Brother Fokwa, can you hear me? Now you are a co-host.
Yes, I can hear you. So I think I need to maybe.
How many minutes might you require to prepare?
I think I was told I would have an allocation of 13 minutes. So that is what I plan to use. I'd like to actually keep to time because you know, the information is actually a lot. You see, we're not dealing with something that is let me see, turn this. Okay, yes, I think that's it. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Okay, it's not actually something that you can rush to. I mean, if I tell you, I've been gathering this information myself over 15, 17 years. So to say that you would just brush through it in 30 minutes, that's not going to be possible. If we could just take our time gradually and then build on the foundation, I think that would be the best. In the last session, actually, what we did is we started looking at the foundations of the concept of shadow government and what we essentially called a cryptocracy. Essentially, we gave the relevance for that. Really Africans. It's a concept that we are aware of. I'm not going to say secret societies are new to us. In Bafut, in my ethnic nation, actually, we have what we call the Kwifon, and the Kwifon is it's basically an organization. It's what you would call a higher priesthood, but it's a network that when individuals in the community do notable things, they're given things like red feathers, porcupine quills. We have people like quarter heads. People do things, and then they're given the right to be a quarter head or recognized in their community. Me myself, I've done the Fami, which is the first initiation, right? It allows me to speak to our king, which is called the Fun, because in our tradition, you don't just speak to our king directly. It has its own type of mystical structure around it. And if you see that in Bafut, we have about a 500-year-old shrine. And this secret society that surrounds the Fon, it's used in such a way to actually integrate into the community, monitor the community. We have what they call the masquerades. I'm sure we're all Africans. We know about this. That's why I'm trying to break it down, that there's always been a type of core around the center of authority in every community of individuals who were known or maybe even unknown, because that is how the structure of even the Kwifon society is in quotes. And what we have now is that indigenous societies had it. When you look at the structure of ancient Kemet or Egypt, the pharaohs, the kings, right back to Amenhotep IV specifically, they trace a secret society line, which he created around his I mean, I call it the pharaonic or the king's court, which they say actually preserved itself systematically through various dynasties, right up until the point of the time when the Greeks are coming in to conquer now the area. This is how far back they actually do trace some of the history of the secret societies, so that we start to realize that just as it's practiced indigenously in Africa, and we know that Kemet with the migrations out of Africa established that location, I never shy away from concluding that it's a culture that we evolved, that when the Romans and Europeans now took over the center of civilization, where the king's court had evolved to that grand capacity of that empire. they used what they were able to learn from the sages, our wise men, those people who were attached to us. Because we're not talking secret society just for political power. The research of the neighborhood, when they talk of secret societies in Europe, they quote names like Isaac Newton, Benjamin Franklin. These were scientists as well. The core intelligentsia of the ancient realms would have been operating now also around this secret society. And when you find now the Greek civilization coming to conquer ancient Kemet, they now take over this aspect of knowledge that our ancestors had derived. And eventually it's handed over to the Romans. And that's where we now left our last discussion, now synchronizing that we started to look at how Emperor Constantine had taken over the center of civilization from Greece. But then he established now a religion, which he called Christianity. And then he gave it certain symbolisms. He devised a whole Nicene Creed. He held ecumenical councils. He created a whole structure around it that, as he integrated it into the empires, as like would say maybe the theocratic or religious paradigm of the empire, he forced every other religious cult to merge its own concepts into that. And that's how we now have the Roman Catholic Church evolving from that period. We made it very clear to point this out, because if you can't see the Roman Catholic Church today as still being a organization which carries a political agenda, because we have to point out that you saw that the Roman Empire, if we're looking at even just this map here on the screen, I don't know, is it sharing this, or I think it should be. Oh, no, it's not sharing the screen. It's instead on me. I think I might need to reverse it. But just like I'm trying to point out, you see that we're evolving now that a secret society or a type of cryptocracy. Because when we say secret society, people at times will think that it's secret. But now we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church. It's not actually secret. It's an open society. But then there's so many other organizations within the Roman Catholic Church is what we're going to start to evolve before we start talking of the Knights Templars, which is evolved out of it, the Jesuits, the various Franciscan monks. All of these organizations now take back their core to the fact that at the helm of the papacy in Rome, in the Vatican, which is basically like the child of the Roman Empire, they have maintained a core organization which has been able to spread out around the world through various fraternities, and now kind of, in a way, influences and controls and directs all of our governments. Because when we start to look at the African context, we find out that individuals like Charles de Gaulle, who were students and proteges of the Jesuits, his father was a Jesuit, he himself had a very powerful influence on writing the Brazzaville Conference in 1944, which actually stated these 10 points that people are always complaining about, that the 14 French colonies in Africa have bound themselves to. It's because the mentality and an orientation of thought within Christianity is given to people to believe that the religion is so dominant, such that all these organizations now form out of it, with the knights being people who are sworn to defend this cause, that we might fear at times that actually Christianity being an open society and then having other secret societies related to it, somehow we find a contrary ambition when you might be working with an individual who holds that mentality. And I mean, you might not feel it at the at the objective conscious level, but subconsciously the fear would be that if someone has been reprogrammed to believe that they're inferior, and the European man is the how would we say the Gentile, is chosen of Jesus Christ, and he is the one now leading the Great Commission on the earth through the Roman Empire to bring all other indigenous people under this. When you have been now indoctrinated to believe this as an African man, you actually will take conscious actions against the development of your own people, thinking in this whole cosmic concept of Christianity, that as you are evolving with these people and Jesus Christ is coming. I think I made mention of the cosmic material the other day. If I can get this to open, that if you take the timeline that they have given to us after conquering us as the Roman Empire, they're making us believe that all of human civilization is progressing towards the point when their Lord, who they have given to us, Jesus Christ, will come. So our time sequence, our belief in structuring our economics, the way that we have arranged ourselves politically by even submitting our own kings to their own, and even to Masonry behind King Charles and all of these things, it's all us accepting this belief through force, now moving along in this paradigm, assuming that though we were people who We didn't believe you could actually own the land before the 15th century. You would move, settle somewhere, the tribe would name itself of the land, and then maybe after some time migrate to another area. This whole conception of owning land, dominating it, believing that it's limited, such as the European came out of his continent. I mean, the Roman Church actually taught that the world was flat up to a point. You see that when the Portuguese and the Spaniards start to do their conquest or explorations or invasions of Africa, it's actually under the pretext that they are discovering the rest of the world. Now, if you're discovering the rest of the world and your core religious organization, which is like your UN, your intelligentsia, doesn't know the rest of the world exists, then it leads us who are being discovered now to finally conclude and realize that this is a people, an organization who had no knowledge about the world and then went out reversing the system of education and knowledge, intentionally looting and subjecting the rest of the world and conquering us to bring us into a system that out of their ignorance they were establishing. And I think when we read Nkrumah's Conscientism a lot, we start to get that I think it's an inner turmoil, because when I'm not reading the text, I was reflecting on it, that you have to tear apart the whole foundation of what has been given to you, because in their education of us, they used this system, even with the Jesuits. The Jesuits went out under the pretext of civilizing missions, particularly even in French Africa. And they established residential schools in North America, and even what they called boarding schools in Africa, where their priority was to indoctrinate African children out of their culture. This is where the whole practice of shaving children's head, both boys and girls at a very young age, comes from. It was actually a Jesuit practice, which was used to remove the identity of the individual, of the child, and then bring the child back up into this concept of seeing now this whole facade of Christianity as being the dominant paradigm, and you lose your name and you see your own culture too as being inferior. All of this has been systematically done to our people through organizations. And you want to even talk of just even the Jesuits. People look at them as just maybe a quasi-organization of priests who just went to develop schools, but they have a set agenda which was defined since their finding as early as 1540. So when we're talking about secret societies, a lot of them are not even secret. They're operating openly with us. They have individuals, 1, 2, 3 or more, who are working together. And as they are working together, they have objectives which are contrary to the public interest. But when we're educated in their perspective of Eurocentrism, we assume that everything that they're doing, believing that they are civilized, is to our advantage. And when I say a whole structure, a whole governance has been created like this, our whole societies have been created like this. That's why it's very difficult now for us to actually get to a point where we're successful in creating revolutionary movements. Because if we don't educate everyone who would come into that movement to this level of being conscious of themselves entirely, then you could find them being able to compromise us at one point. Now, I want to give someone a few minutes to maybe ask a question or reflect while I try and figure out why I can't get my screen actually up, because this is not going to float well if I'm not able to use some images and define some specific years. So I don't know, are there any reflections or questions that we might get at this moment, please?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that presentation and brief introduction. I'd like to give maybe 5 minutes for any questions as you try to sort anything else or any reaction so far. So if you have any question or any reaction, can raise up your hand so that we can name you directly without going through the chat list. Do you have any reflection or anything that has come in your mind as far as Brother Folk is doing the introduction of this topic? Can you raise up your hand so that you can also answer it as it forms part of the conversation as you move forward? So we'll be taking 5 minutes for this. Is there anybody who has any conversation or a contribution, any reaction so far? Brother Mafafa, do you want to speak? I've seen you've lost your microphone. Okay. Brother Mafafa, do you have anything to speak? Or okay.
Yes, leadership. I'm just following the
Okay, thank you. Sister Nyagudi, do you have anything to speak? And welcome. It's been long. In regards to what Brother Foko is trying to present, or are you having anything that has come in your mind so far, or do you still be interested to listen to more? Okay. Ras Pala, do you have anything that has come in your mind so far?
Yes, my brother, give thanks, man. A lot, my man. But I'll just ask once for the sake of time. Yeah, in fact, I just want to add on the comment of the elder there. When you said that even some of these secret society aren't even secret at all. Because, for instance, look at the Bilderbergers. The Bilderbergers, you can find them online, where all the president states of the world meet up annually, have party, discuss future plans. So yeah, just what I wanted to comment there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sister Lawrence, do you have anything else to say or that has come in your mind?
Good evening, everyone. No, I have nothing to say. I think Fokwa have said a lot of good things.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, if I don't know if there's anybody who still have any question in regards to this. I think Brother Fokwa is still sorting out his issues. But I really have one question. Maybe you'll have to have a reflection later in regards to the secret societies and maybe the Church of Catholic. We know the oldest church. Does it mean that every leader must belong to this Catholic Church? Or because I know most of African leaders within the continent, others belong to the churches, others are either Muslims, others are ever whatever. Do all of them also subscribe to the same doctrine, whether you are a Muslim or those who are Seventh Days Adventists or the Protestants and anything else? Do they all converge and must they all converge to this system? That will be my question. Maybe probably you'll answer as you move forward. Any other one question before 2 minutes are over so that you can proceed? Any other reaction? Okay. If there's no any other reaction, Brother Fokwa, you can proceed also. So
Yes, I don't know. Okay, are we seeing the screen switching? The screen is changing now. Section 2, the spread of Christian imperialism.
Yes, you can
that
see
on the
that.
screen for everyone? Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. Just to answer your question, my brother, this thing, it's like it has tentacles, because even as we are watching the situation in Niger now, you see it when you look closely at some of the history. You see that there was even formation of Freemasonry by Napoleon in Algeria. You see during the 1800 periods. You see before now they even had their own revolution, and then they had to get their own independence under de Gaulle. So you see that as these organizations have moved around, they present themselves on their websites. They say that they just want to make good men better. And they always have these very charismatic objectives that make them seem like they're just maybe, fraternal organizations for good old boys to meet and share ideals, essentially. But beyond that, because business interests are heavily involved in this, you see, it's ironic when you want to look at the Knights Templars in detail as an organization, you find out that they actually were the founders of modern European banking. And it's because during the Crusades, as an organization that was protecting pilgrims. Pilgrims were wealthy people. We shouldn't think of them as just poor people. You had rich monarchs who, the knights had bastions, they had citadels and property that they owned, which had vaults. So someone who was in, let's say, England would then deposit his wealth or what he wished to go on a pilgrimage with the knights in their vault in England, and they would issue him what was called a promissory check. This promissory check now represented the value of what he had deposited with the knights, and then he could now travel with them and be escorted them and reach Jerusalem or any of the locations along the way, where he could now use this check against their commandery to use his revenue, and they would mark it with their seal. And it's a very interesting process that before that, the concept of using checks and banking was not introduced yet into the European banking system. And they say it actually owes to the Templars. So when they were actually banned by, King Philip and the Pope, they went underground, but the Pope merged them into other knights organizations like the Knights of Malta, which we know to actually still be very active today. And there were several other orders that they merged into, and then a group of them went underground and went into Britain, essentially. Now, what they explain is that behind this dissolution, that is where now a group of them also went into Switzerland and then developed now what we see as the modern form of Swiss banking, because they were able to store their wealth away from the king. Because they said the first thing the king of France did was, when he now had them banned, he went to their treasuries and tried to seize their money because he owed them a lot of money. I mean, they're saying the Knights Templars owned about 3/4 of France at the time. We're not just talking about knights in the context of a militaristic organization. They rose to the point that they actually rivaled the Roman Catholic Church, which is why when King Philip now brought up the accusations against them, Pope Clement at the time, the third, he was willing now to back him against them so that they would suppress the organization and give the papacy back now its authority throughout the empire. So the history they explain is that the modern banking that we are practicing today goes into the Templars. And you understand that Napoleon II merged Templarism into his administration, and he was also a militaristic person. He also founded the first national bank of France during the Third Republic. So you see that Templarism is actually integrated into French banking, European banking, to the point that when we start to see what we would call Muslim North African nations being attacked, being invaded. And then let's just get into this. I know you all are really going to like this. You start to realize that, like I say, the core of this policy, this belief of this hegemony, when you look at the spread of Christian imperialism, it's something that should be taken in very, very close context, because what we talk about in the Christian church that guides its policy is canon law. Canon law is not something that has been developed only recently under the modern Roman Catholic Church. Canon law actually goes back to as early as the Nicene Creed, once again in 325 CE under Constantine. But by tradition, they claim that the canon law began to be devised as early as the disciples. Now, me, I like to always stand on very hard history. I never allude to the Bible as being a sound historical text, so I never quote it as history. I always lean specifically on what we know would be found in a history book that you could find and be able to verify. So we start to look at how Christian expansion and hegemony moves with canon law and their desire to gain land, because under Constantine as an emperor, he was using this religion as an open society with his Nicene Creed, essentially, to tell every other religious or nation that he would confront that if you don't assimilate this ideology and belief, we will subject you. And most people accepted. Those that didn't, of course, we know what their fate was, such that we know that by 63 BCE, the Roman Empire had already conquered Palestine, such that by the time you see Constantine rising now, the area right up to what we call the Middle East today is already under Roman imperial control before he's even establishing Christianity, all right up until Morocco, Carthage, North Africa, but not below what we know as our Saharan desert, such that though this area is controlled by the Roman Empire, Constantine passes, and then the Christian Byzantine Empire actually loses the empire because he creates a divide separating from Rome and establishes now his empire in Constantinople, which is why you have to start to understand a lot about the Byzantine Empire, because the Byzantine Empire only refers to what Constantine, as the emperor stroke chief priest of the Roman Empire, created as his own capital while controlling all of the empire. But this authority over Palestine, which is where they were grafting the core logic of their religion from, because they claimed their Christianity links back to a city or a province in Palestine called Judea. So he actually recreates the city, the Jerusalem, in 324 CE to justify all of this, his religion that he's going to evolve now. But that area gets conquered by the Rashidun Caliphate in 636 CE. So from that time now, the Roman Empire with the Roman Church, which has evolved, has lost control over Palestine. They have an idea now that evolves in canon law that when they want to gain territories back that have been taken, they call it terra irredenta, that's lands needing to be restored to legitimate Christian leaders. Now, the lands which are not actually owned by Christians yet, that are uninhabited by Christians, lands considered by Europeans to be inhabited by people without civility or a polis, people that they essentially would consider are uncivilized, heathens, pagans. They refer to this as terra nullius, or nobody's lands. And these 2 points are extremely important when we start to see how the evolution of the hegemony of the church as an empire starts to evolve. Because lands that were lost by the church, like we pointed out, Palestine, it is in their policy to reclaim it under terra irredenta, even till today. It will seem crazy to some people to look at it, but when we're talking in the context of cryptocracies and shadow governments and policies and organizations who have traditions and they have papal bulls and documents which have already been written dictating that these are the objectives, do you think that over time, when history changes, these objectives as these organizations continue to exist are just thrown away and wiped away? They do not, which is why you have things like CIA, MI6, Carbonari, all of these organizations as intelligentsia, Jesuitism. It operates with this code to always make sure that the empire is restored and lands that need to be taken from non-Christians are received back. As we'll continue to evolve, we're not just making this up. You will see the evidence for this throughout history, because we always seem to think that the way we inherited Christianity, it was by some evangelism of them coming here very happily and teaching us that they wanted to save us from Jesus Christ. In truth, all of this has been a ploy to submit us, essentially. And it's been successful. So just like we pointed out, hegemony is essentially the leadership or dominance, especially by one state or social group over others. Canon law actually formally begins, like we put out, in 325 CE with the Nicene Creed, and traditionally it's still evolving right up until now. We'll get a clear definition that canon law is the system of laws and legal principles made and enforced by the church's hierarchical authorities to regulate its external organization and government, and to order and direct the activities of Catholics towards the mission of the church. So every Catholic, right even into wherever we are in Africa, is under a directive of canon law. I mean, if you see the last quotation, they actually acknowledge that it was the foundation of the Western legal system, because when they started to invade lands, they're like the Native Americans today, they are in court with the US government, and the US government cites the Dum Diversas and Doctrine of Discovery and papal bulls and canon laws for the right that Europeans had to invade and seize their lands. So when you are studying reparations, you have to contextually always look at the Native American history and application of the Christian theology, because it is the same application which was applied also in Africa. Therefore, meaning that the canon law that they applied and Dum Diversas gave them the legal precedent under the Portuguese to invade Africa with government authority, because this is now power given to the monarchs by the Roman Catholic Church, concluding therefore that slavery itself actually was initiated by a papal bull by the Roman Catholic Church. This is why Africa was invaded. This is how Christian hegemony has begun to be spread out throughout the entire planet through these papal bulls and edicts, because the creation of colonies was decreed also by church authority. So what type of papal bulls? When we start to look at the relationship between Christianity and the Muslim Moors, it's very interesting, because it starts to lead even into a clear understanding of why we as dominant melanated people, Black Africans, were invaded and enslaved. There was a papal bull issued in April 4th, 1418, called Decene Carissimus by Pope Martin V, which acknowledged 2 military campaigns on the request of the Portuguese King John I against the Moorish invasion of the Iberian Peninsula as crusades. Now, this is very important. Why? Because we looked at how the Roman Empire had spread out and established its authority. When we're talking of the Iberian Peninsula, this would have been called Hispania under the old Roman Empire. But by the time now of the 711 CE period, it had actually, excuse me, it had been invaded now by the Muslims, who had also conquered the area of Palestine at 636 CE. Some of these years are always very important to keep in mind. So as the Muslims swept that area through North Africa, they came now to where Morocco essentially is. And there's a very short distance from Morocco to actually Spain. The ships that move across there, they have very free access. And the Muslims invaded Spain during this period. And incidentally, we have to always acknowledge that North Africa was dominated by dark-skinned people during this period. Arab Islam invaded and came in, yes, but there were conversions as well as forced conversions of areas that were conquered, in which dominant melanated people, our African brothers and sisters who were in North Africa at that time, became Muslims. And they also contributed to the armies that invaded Spain, crossing over the city of Quetta. I mean, it's very interesting because this is history that they don't teach explicitly to our children, and they should, because then we would learn that during this period, Black people also had white people as slaves. So, I mean, it's very intriguing because we are given the perception that we have always been enslaved and we were designated only as Black people, and we are dejected right from nowhere as they start to teach in their mixture of doctrines and dogmatism. But the true history is that since we had invaded Hispania and started to threaten now the Roman Empire and its Christendom from this Western location, it became now a priority of the Crusades that they must war and drive out the Muslim populations in this area. So this Sane Carissimus was decreed by Pope Martin V to the Portuguese King John in 1418, after he had successfully fought battles in 1415 and then redefended Quetta again in 1417. And specifically, the Portuguese king, he wanted a papal bull to decree his battles as crusades, because when his battles would have been decreed as crusades, it gave him now the right to sell the captives, the Black people, as well as Berber, Arab, Muslims into slavery, because the slave trade was going on predominantly throughout the Mediterranean at that time, but it was not specifically designative of dark-skinned people. So Christians were fought in wars, they were sold as slaves. Muslims, everyone was exchanging one another. And the papal bull now was given to him that he could sell the people that he conquered there now as slaves. So the Portuguese monarchy from that point used this authority from the papacy to continue to raid lands within the Moorish territory, which is going to be now along North Africa and many islands. There were islands too near Morocco. There's an island called Madeira in 1418, which actually they discovered, which had no people on it, Terra Nullius. And you see the Portuguese now occupied this land and claimed it for Portugal under this papal bull that had been given to Portuguese King John I, Sane Carissimus. Now, the Portuguese King Henry the Navigator, also a part of this papal bull now, when they reconquered these areas from the Moor, they discovered maps. This is where now you start to see that the Portuguese and the Spanish now start to claim that they're going out to discover the world before our history is being retaught to us. And we have now concepts that explain to us that we were already in South America and we had already crossed over to Brazil before even Columbus had gone there. But they refute this because there's history that the Portuguese don't want to explain to us. But you start to see crystal clear that when they invaded Spain, they came into archives that Moorish dark-skinned Africans who were also on North Africa and had access to able to cross the Saharan desert and knew about the Songhai Empire where there was gold, because they were trading in gold with the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, the Europeans always would question, where was the gold crossing the Saharan desert coming from? If it's not coming from the desert and they can't penetrate through the Arab lands to go into the interior to discover it, then it was their priority eventually to be able to sail around Quetta and get further down the West African shore to discover where the gold was coming from. This is what sent the Portuguese out under the Papal Bull Dum Diversas in 1452, which is where we're eventually going to come to next. So that you start to put it in your context and you realize that in this war and fighting to reestablish the Christian hegemony over Europe, it incited now a priority with the Christian church now to war now with dark-skinned Africans, Muslims, and continue to press forward now on an economic conquest to derive now wealth to build up their empire, which is what now forces now King Henry the Navigator to send out ships that eventually discovered the Fanti in 1471 along what has now become the Gold Coast. And we have so many other ports that the Portuguese discover right up until going around the Cape and meeting even Kenya, so it's around the 1500s. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We look now at the Dum Diversas and this concept of the doctrine of discovery, where the Christian European church is given now the European monarchs and Christian Europeans, because the knights are involved. That everyone believes that they're superior to anyone who is not a Christian European, and they have the right to go out into their lands and vanquish and subdue them. Explicitly now, in 1452, the Dum Diversas was decreed by Pope Nicholas V, and he stated within it that you have the right to capture, vanquish, and subdue the Saracens. Now, Saracens is just a medieval term for Muslims. It refers to the individuals and people who are essentially living in the desert lands. So he says, capture, vanquish, and subdue the Saracens, pagans, and other enemies of Christ, and put them into perpetual slavery, and to take all their possessions and their property. Now let's put this in clear contextualization again to understand how we as dominant melanated people were enslaved in the order of this organization's expansion and its logic. Because all people of all skin colors and spiritual paths could be enslaved equally before the Pope decreed the Dum Diversas in 1452. We just pointed this out. But what is so vile about this document is that it actually commits non-Christians to perpetual slavery, meaning that all dominant melanated people on the African continent would subsequently be enslaved with their children and continued generation of families inheriting this condition. Before, in the social economic practice of slavery, which was conducted economically on the planet, this condition had never been applied on this wide institutional scale. And this is what makes the variance of what they would even say was Africans enslaving each other not anywhere related to what the church decreed. Because without the church coming and giving this moral legalization and justifying it, the enslavement of dominant melanated people from Africa into the 400 and 500 year period that we have suffered never would have happened. Specifically, Spain had also crossed the Atlantic Ocean with Christopher Columbus's sail in 1492 and discovered the land called the Americas. So with the lands called the Americas, they attempted to enslave the original nations and peoples there, but they had difficulty. And eventually Queen Isabella of Spain sanctioned now that her people in the Native Americans in the lands that were under her would be justified as citizens, and they started to convert to Christianity. So with their conversion to Christianity, the Native Americans now, it now made them unliable to be enslaved under the Dum Diversas. So Bishop Las Casas now began to campaign specifically that to replace the needed slave labor in the newfound colonies of the Americas, they should enslave the dark-skinned African, because the dark-skinned African comes from a climate which is tropical and is akin to do the hard manual labor which they're trying to force the Native Americans to do. On top of that, he also used biblical dogma to explain that from the verse in the book of Genesis, I think it's chapter 10 or 11, where Noah pronounced a curse on Canaan. He used these rationale of dogmas to explain that because of that interlude in the Bible, which is why I say I don't use this as a historical text. He claimed that Noah cursing Canaan and Ham being the father of Canaan and the descendants named in that verse and passage were representative of major African civilizations known at the time, that is why dominant melanated people, Africans, even according to the Bible, were supposed to be enslaved. All of these doctrines and justifications were created during this period now to evolve to justify why the Roman Church now moved with the Portuguese and Spanish and eventually other European monarchs behind the justification of the Dum Diversas came into Africa and established now British Royal Company, Virginia Company, British West India Company, and all of these organizations to sell Black people as a designated human cargo.
Brother Fokwa?
Yes, my brother.
I'll give you 2 minutes to wrap up this presentation up to this moment. Then we can take now questions and reaction to your presentation moving forward. So you will wrap up this first session in the next 2 minutes. Then now we can have some reactions. Then we will prepare for the next phase of this conversation later, also maybe moving forward some other time. Thank you for this.
Yes, that is no trouble. That is no trouble.
So kindly have a summary of the presentation. Key points that you can highlight for us from the first.
Good. So even if we just involve other papal bulls, is essentially what we would look at just to give more justification. And then we have our map which shows out the Iberian Peninsula on the left as it was dominated by the Moorish people with the Caliphate of Cordoba and Asturias and Navarra and the small counties representing the other European nations. And then you see that by 1270 up to 1492 now, with the Crusades that had come into the area, the land was seized back, forcing now this need for conquest to be established. So we see that their motivation for invading Africa and spreading out even into the rest of Europe was pushed by them being driven by the terra nullius and terra irredenta concept to restore land that had been taken from them. But then also in the context of fighting with the Moors, which were non-Christian, they began to war with the people who were non-Christian. And in the pretext of this canon law, giving them the justification to take their land and continue to subdue them, eventually now the Christian expansion of Constantine's empire through the church continued now to expand. And the other slides would bring us finally to defining what the Crusades were, which they started as early as we would say even 535 with the Gothic invasions and them seizing the land once again, as we're seeing our map. I want us to be able that if we're starting next time, we would be able to get to section 3 good, so that we'll be able to definitely get into detail with the Jesuits. But our final conclusion is just that Christianity was spread throughout Europe by coercion and war, is what the slides detail and bring forth. The Roman Catholic Church has been fighting to restore all the lands which it has held as the Roman Empire, and has been at war with the Muslims since Palestine was lost in 636 to 641 CE. And the Christian Church enslaved Africans because they were not Christian. Black Africans who were also Muslim invaded Spain for almost 800 years, and the papacy authorized the Portuguese and Spanish to enslave Africans, to seize their wealth and persecute them for invasion of Europe and not to save them. This is the evolution of Constantine's mission and his Roman Catholic Church, and that is where I will end.
Thank you very much, Brother Foko, for that. I think I would like to request each member to at least unmute their microphone and either have a clap or anything to this wonderful presentation. So you can just unmute your mic wherever you are and just have a clap for him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, leadership for thank you.
Brother PJ.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Yes, Brother Kwame? Yes.
Yeah, if it's okay for you, I would like us to have a musical interlude for such a wonderful presentation before we continue.
Thank you, and that's permitted. So, Brother Fokwa, after this music interlude and all members present here, we'll be having questions that might need some explanation in regards to what Brother Fokwa is saying, and I will request that our questions be directed to the current concept and context, what's happening in Africa in regards to what he has said and presented here, so that we can have the relation between what is the history and the current context. So, Brother Kwame, can we have the music interlude?
Can you hear it? Can you hear the music, brother?
I can't hear it.
No.
Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
Okay. Can you hear it now?
Just play
No.
it. You have not played it. Play it. Can Brother Fokwa stop sharing the screen? We can't see. So Brother Fokwa should stop sharing the screen.
Can you see my screen?
Oh, let's see. Is it this? Stop video. This thing like this.
Of course, there are two screens on the table, but we cannot see. So unless you bring your screen forth.
Okay, I've seen it.
Can anybody hear the song? Can everybody hear the song?
Stop sharing. Okay, that's it.
So, Brother Kwame, can you share the screen?
Okay, well, Let me try again.
Nice.
Can you hear it? Can you see it now?
We can hear the song.
Can you hear the music?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a short. That's it. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Kindly explain to us what's the history of that music, where or who sang it.
Well, as I understand, it's an emotional struggle song. It traces back to the mass killings that took place during the struggle for independence. And Dr. Ndlozi, South African, he's the one leading that song. As we know, South Africa has a special place in our hearts as Africans because of apartheid and what they went through. And that system that oppresses the Africans, which Brother Kua has been explaining to us in terms of its origin, where it all came from. Yeah, so this song is emotional. It reminds us of what we went through, and will continue to remind us. It's a revolutionary song, and it's a song that we should never forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Kwame, for that. Yes, to all members who are joining us today. Today we were having our special guest, Brother Fokwa, who has done his first part of his presentation in regards to, of course, the shadow governments or the secret governments of the secret world, and how, of course, the Catholic Church and the orders that were given for enslavement and also repossession of land and everything else. So it has been a wonderful presentation for the last 40 minutes, and I will take a rejoinder of interaction to that presentation in the next 20 minutes. So I will allow members to ask questions, and Brother Fokwa will be responding in the next 20 minutes, so that in maybe UK time, by 8:30, we should be done with this. And then we can have now a general summation to put this into context. So I'll request members who are present here to kindly, if you have any question, you can raise your hand, or if you have any reaction to the presentation, or even if you can have any thinking to expand it further, you have time to do so. So let me start by Sister Ida, whose hand is up. Then the next person should also raise his or her hand bar up, so that after Sister Ida, we go to the next person. Sister Ida?
I was wondering if you could tell us something about the popes. Like, where did they sort of originate from? Because I presume that they had started off from the Middle East, like they were Christians, but somehow they went to Rome. But I don't know how they got to Rome and how all the bits to do with Rome started. I know that popes were married at one point, then they weren't married. But because there have been so many popes you mentioned, I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about the popes, how they became so powerful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the first question. I'll take the next question, second question, then we go back to Brother Fokwa for answering that. Any other question again? Raise up your hand. so that I give the second question, then you go to Brother Fokwa to respond. Anybody with any extra question? Or even any thinking to expand on whatever Brother Fokwa said or anything else? If no, then okay, Brother Fokwa, you can come in. Anybody who has any other question should prepare to raise his hand after this response from Brother Fokwa. So Brother Fokwa can respond to that question if you're able or if you're capable to do so.
Yes, actually, the question was about the origins of the Pope's power and authority. You see, we pointed out that the church was founded by Emperor Constantine. So this is where the origins of that amount of power comes from, because the tradition they give you is that Jesus Christ started his religion in Jerusalem, but a member of the Sanhedrin, Paul, took that religion and came to Rome, where he was executed. Now, in him being in Rome, that also caused eventually Saint Peter and other disciples. This is according to the tradition. There's absolutely no evidence to back this, but they at last conclude that Paul came to Rome and Peter came to Rome. And Peter now coming to Rome now, because Jesus had said in the Bible that he was establishing his church on an utterance that Peter made about him being the Christ, that when Peter came now to Rome, he established now the succession of what became the Roman Catholic Church. So in the Roman Catholic Church tradition, they say that St. Peter is the first pope. And then they give now a line of other bishops now, as they will be called. They've been made into saints or individuals who would have then headed what they say was the original church of Christians in Rome, up until the time that now Constantine decided to ban the persecutions against them and became a Christian himself, because it's not actually made a state religion until 380 CE under its Emperor Theosophius specifically. But what we see now is that once the religion is made now the state religion, and Constantine has now adopted it, when he creates this doctrine of the Trinity, it basically justifies that the emperor, who's representative of the Son on earth, is the representative also of Jesus Christ, who is the representative of God, essentially. That's how the Trinity doctrine in the Nicene Creed is actually structured, in such a way that the Pope is given the title, the Vicar of Christ. That's Vicarius Filidae. He's also given the title Pontifex Maximus, which is also an original title of the Roman Emperor Caesar's as well. So what happens is that when Constantine now, as the emperor, has given the religion this power, and then you have the bishop of Rome now acting subordinate to him, when he creates now the capital of Rome in Constantinople and shifts there, it leaves now the Roman bishop to not have an emperor over him in Rome. But remember, Rome for so many hundreds of years had been acknowledged as the capital of the empire. So because of the, we could say, religious or the temporal influence of the bishop, the pope, having that relationship and proximity to who the emperor was from Rome, when now eventually Constantine is in Constantinople, and then he passes away eventually, and then Justinian comes. I think that's around 530 or so CE. He actually merges the authority of the bishop of the Pope and the emperor together, and he operates now from Constantinople as a spiritual and political authority, which now kind of creates a little bit of conflict with the Roman bishop at that time. But the Roman Empire from Rome had been suppressed with the invasions of the Visigoths, or the Germanic tribes that were around that area. So eventually you see that the Western Empire of Byzantine now comes back and reconquers the Western Empire and liberates Rome, bringing the empire now back together. And because Justinian had shifted the authority from what had become the Pope with that authority over Rome back into himself as the head of Constantinople, when now you see that the Byzantine Empire now also falls eventually. You see it. You see that the Pope now in Rome regains all of this political and temporal and you could say spiritual authority over all of the dioceses and the different branches of the church where it had caused conversions throughout the empire. And then the Pope now is able to consolidate all of that authority on that particular position into antiquity. It's only when Napoleon comes along, I think in the 1800s, like that, 1809, that he takes Pope Pius VII and arrests him. Before now, that whole belief in papal infallibility and the authority of the Pope is suppressed. But that is what gave now the Pope that impression in the entire empire that, like we say, infallibility. It's another concept in canon law that no Pope can say something or any decree that they give it's perfect. It's justified. When they speak as the representative of Jesus Christ, who is the Son of the Creator of the universe. So anything that the Pope says and binds on earth is bound through that authority, passing through Saint Peter to what they aspire to be God in heaven. And it's all derived through this lineage of Constantine being an emperor and passing it on, and the popes now being able to assimilate that authority through Justinian balancing the two positions upon his own authority, and then the Byzantine Empire being lost and the authority now going back to the popes. That's how they've claimed infallibility and run the European empire all of this while. I think that's the best way to explain that.
Thank you for that wonderful explanation. Do you have any other reaction to the presentation? Or anybody who might want to connect this presentation to the current issues in Africa in regards to land, slavery, and everything else? Yes, Sister Teresa, it's nice to see you around. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm so upset that I missed it. I'm so sorry. I do understand the subject a little bit, so I'm asking a question based on my knowledge. I missed the presentation. I didn't see your notice, but I heard the last bit of it, and it was very interesting. From my research, brother, there is a connection between the secret society and the transition into the religion. Did you cover that in your presentation? And if so, the bearing I'm looking at is how the spiritual, the spiritual craft, the dark arts has gone into Africa and has put a spell over the continent. And if there's anything that you could share about that, and potentially anything we could do to break that spell. And the kind of question I'm asking is about, taking artifacts, burying our leaders, burying our ancestors in certain places. And on the ley line of the continent, there is history before that they have used and taken it from us and manipulated it and turned us into these spiritual people, but without the power that was ours originally. I hope it's not too much of a long question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sister Teresa, for that. We still have 10 minutes to have this interaction session. So, Brother Fokwa, you can come in and respond to that. Brother Fokwa, you can unmute yourself and respond to that.
I was talking and didn't unmute. Sorry. Okay. Pardon me. Okay. But the question, it links to something that we explained earlier when we were talking about how the whole idea of what a secret society is, it's originally African. That's a matter of fact, because we have around every king some type of a group of elders or mystical society comprised with a priest, which from that organization now, notables and individuals throughout the community are also linked into being able to approach the palace and interact, give reports of what is happening in the community, present projects, things that would interest them essentially. Because when we're talking of secret societies, I don't look at them and I don't ever like to present them to people in the context of, what we have is the Christian church is an open society. And then with its propaganda, it's always portrayed the idea of secret societies as being something diabolic and negative. Meanwhile, itself is an open society. It's a secret society, but it's presenting itself like it's open because behind it, it has different orders and organizations and fraternities and groups that you don't just approach, just like Freemasonry. To join Freemasonry, you have to know someone and write a petition, and then they'll have their meeting and they have a little box and they'll take a white ball, and everyone who accepts you puts a white ball. But if one member puts a black ball into it, it disqualifies your membership. They're not going to say that they a closed group that they don't allow people to join. They would just say that you were not allowed membership because of you didn't meet some particular criteria, essentially. So when we're applying this concept to the idea of secret societies, why do we want to always look at them as being like secret diabolic? In the context of understanding that they come from the African context of there always being a core in society that creates what we call shadow government. When we say shadow, we think of darkness and something being hidden from the light. Of course, yes, there are things that they don't bring into the open and discuss in the open. Just like in the PowerPoint, the first analogy I gave is that a lawyer, a judge, and a prosecutor can be friends and go to the same church. And after church, maybe standing outside, a discussion might prick up about the justice situation in relation to something the pastor said, and a comment about a case they're coming on might come up, something of that nature. And you see that what goes on in the back private interactions of people who are in what is public life, there's a gray line between how it interacts, and it goes back to our own societies and how we created our own structures of administration and governance, such that when we're talking now, you said the mystical aspect, I want to get now into that. You see it. It's always been easier to govern populations, to run a civilization if I wouldn't want to use the word control, but to be fair in the context of understanding that our own ancestors did use spiritual religious systems to the detriment of our people, because there was involvement in slave trade. We do have things that I've read in some Nigerian ethnic groups. They tell me in the Igbo of the murder of twins. We read of kings who had slaves and wives buried with them. These things were practiced in Cameroon. You see, some of these, what I would call negative aspects in spiritual systems that are religious oriented, which would now operate around a monarchy with this secret society, is the same thing we see now being migrated now out of Africa into Egypt. By the time the Greeks are taking over it, making it Rome, Constantine now is evolving it. Before now, the church has created their system, and the Knights Templars moved to Jerusalem, and then they interact with the Arabs, and then they learn also about the ancient systems and this secret society knowledge, and then they come back with it, and they establish their rivalry system to the Catholic system, and the Catholics ban them, and then they go underground and divide, and then go into England and become the Freemasons, and then the Freemasons come back into France in the 1800s or late 1700s and reform the Knights Templars again. And then you see now the organizational structure of it all just kind of, it diffuses, because now when you start talking about Knights Templars, they're at the backbone of so many other different organizations that you'll start to hear the names of them being called all over the earth in one way or another. And the orientation of it is that when you're talking about God, when you're talking about spirit, and you're seeing that all of these organizations are oriented around this core of secret knowledge. The secret knowledge they're keeping is knowledge of the human subconsciousness. How do you give humans symbols that will allow them to interpret reality and then be able to, how could I say, perhaps even manipulate or use their own subconscious and objective conscious capacities? You see it, because that's what religion, it does. When you see someone healing someone with the spontaneous healing, what are they doing? They're accessing their subconsciousness. They're getting into a mechanism, something within them, that there are sciences about how it can be approached or used or utilized that have always been taught and kept in the context of what they call occult knowledge or hidden knowledge. Or when we say occult is something that is more even Roman, because when we practice nature-based spirituality, even with the yogic traditions, the Eastern traditions. It's the Europeans going to Eastern traditions to learn what they're calling occulticism, mysticism. But if the yogi and the Indians are already practicing it, it's not mysticism, it's not occult to them. It's just their natural spirituality. So I don't know, yeah, you can go ahead and interrupt, but I'm trying to link that idea that what they do with all of it is that they create these groups and then they use the knowledge that interacts with the human subconsciousness. And then they use new archetypes or symbols within the context of whichever culture they're trying to breed it in to now place principles inside individuals' minds that make them now respond to that tradition in a particular way. That's how I see the manipulation of the spirituality going. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Okay, thank you. Chair, can I ask now that we begin to move to linking all that we have heard so far to the unification of Africa, because Saturdays, as you know, is a day that we have a conversation about the unification of Africa under one all-African government. And as we speak, there is a difference of opinion between the African Union and ECOWAS with respect to the use of the military. We hear that the African Union does not want a military solution, but that wants diplomacy and other means. And ECOWAS, as you know, have already had a meeting in Ghana this past week, to ratify an operational plan. They are not planning to use it yet. They'll give diplomacy a chance. So yeah, so Chair, can we now link all that we've heard and what Brother Foucault has been sharing with us, all links up with this whole question of the unification of Africa. And let me remind all of us that when Nkrumah and others came to the continent after the 1945 conference in Manchester in England, that the idea of a continental government was not primary in Nkrumah's mind. If anything at all, he was also thinking about a regional unification, as we have right now. But it was whilst he was in government, he said to us, that he realized that our enemies always thought in terms of the continent. And so it was important that African governments come together, create one continental government so that our policies and so on will be continental. So yeah, so Brother Chair, yeah, so over to you, thank you. And oh, sorry, just before you continue, I'd like to welcome all of us to today's meeting, where we have an African conversation about African affairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. In fact,
no, sorry, you are the chair. I'm just overseeing everything. I'm repeating, you are the chair today.
Okay. So, with regards to Brother Foucault, he has touched on two key issues that are very important that we can help to contextualize them today. One is on the aspect of the reclaiming of land under the command of the church command, that all lands to be either reclaimed or be whatever. And up to date, we know there's struggle in Africa to take over our land and the mineral resources under our land. We can link this context to what's going on in Nigeria or Niger. It's all about our resources and anything in our land. There's the aspect of enslaving us that is also under the presentation of Brother Foucault, why the enslavement and the commands of enslavement came along. Up to date, we are still either puppets or servants of the West through neocolonialism. And it's like you're serving them indirectly, and we don't know this. It's more of a form of slavery that you're having today. So therefore, I would like us, based on this understanding, how can you contextualize whatever is going on here? And what is the way forward? As you're giving your presentation, how can you touch on the current affairs in Africa in regards to the presentation, and what is your suggestion or your thinking best way forward? So you just don't give the problems, but what do you find also is a solution from your side? So I'll go rounds within another 30 minutes will be okay for me, but I'll start with Sister Ida, then I'll move to Lawrence. In that part of Lawrence, I'll move to Sister Nyagudi, then Ras Pala. So let's start by Sister Ida. Sister Ida?
Okay. Brother Falconer, in light of all the questions that have just been asked to you from Brother Kwame. Could you also touch on whether the army are a bit of a secret society in their own way? Are they trained almost like a secret society? Thank you.
Should I answer that?
Can I come in? Quickly. Yeah, can I come? I think you can answer it. Yeah, that's fine. But I think what Sister Ida is getting at is if you take the problem in West Africa, for instance, the army met in Ghana this week and came out with an operational plan. Now, the question is, how come all the army are speaking with one voice? Is that because we know the political leaders are divided? Yeah, we know that. Some of the political leaders, the presidents, do not agree. Cape Verde, for instance, doesn't want to have anything to do with military intervention. And then we have Nigeria, who is all for military intervention. But all the military leaders are speaking with one voice. Is that because they belong to some secret society? I think that is what, to get to the heart of your presentation today, I think that is what Sister Ida's question is getting at. Thank you.
Yes, let me really build that up there, because it's a matter of fact, my brother, because like we haven't gotten into it yet. Like I said, we would get through Jesuits and then we would talk about the Knights Templars specifically. But the Knights Templars are a military organization which Napoleon Bonaparte came and met, but he merged the fraternity into the military. This is all documented inside the French history. They don't hide this information. It's just that, I don't know, maybe people are not really keen to look for that dynamic of thought. So if we say Napoleon now merges this idea of Knights Templarism and Freemasonry back into the military, and then eventually this is the same military that comes and invades Africa. Because when we talk of Niger specifically, I started developing the PowerPoints for it. Niger was first established as a military territory, a French military outreach post. It wasn't created like we saw other colonies as like we saw British West African Company, or some company came with funding specifically from some monarch. By the time they had penetrated and gotten as far as Niger, this was French military going into the interior. The same thing again with Mali, same thing again with Burkina Faso. So when we trace the history back to seeing Napoleon integrated Knights Templarism into the military, and then General de Gaulle eventually comes along, and you see the policies that he actually gives to these French West African countries all follow this concept and orientation of them looking down on the African states. Specifically, they say in France, their whole Christian philosophy behind their Jesuitism is that Africans need to be civilized, that we cannot govern ourselves. There are certain documents where de Gaulle is very, very clear that there's no way we can actually, in their belief as French people, govern and raise the civilization without their support. So this is the type of belief that goes into this core organization of Templarism, which is the backbone of the French military, which also structurized their banking, which, as we see, they invaded North Africa as well, because Napoleon was in North Africa for a period. And if he's bringing his military with this fraternization as its backbone, it means he's also bringing this network into North Africa. So before we fast forward ahead to the 1960s and you see us trying to get independence out of it, we wouldn't see it on the forefront of how we interpret history, but in the background of our interpretation of history, we have to acknowledge that there is a core military agenda amongst the French as they are linked to this terra irredenta ideology of canon law from the church in North Africa to contain and control that land and harvest its resources, keeping the Muslim populations who were the Moorish people who had originally invaded Europe, the Roman Empire, and then been forced out, with them taking back these Northern African territories, which were originally the Roman Empire and the terra irredenta. They're taking back their land and then taking more land through terra nullius. That is the ideology of what is mixed in Templarism and the church and its movement now into Niger, into Mali. It's neocolonialism, it's imperialism. But when we say imperialism, it's the Roman Empire in this grandiose, psychological, shadowy political, economic form through these various tentacles, that it's still accomplishing the same objective. That's what we said about the cryptocracies. You always will know it by its objective, not necessarily by its members calling out their name. You see the objective repeated itself flawlessly. And then by the time you start to identify the individuals who are Knights Templars, like Mohammed Bazoum, he wears the OST, the Order of the Supreme Temple Initiate lapel pin. It's a red rose. I could maybe bring up those photos and share them, and you would start to realize that it's a pattern from Macron to individuals at IMF, Bolloré. They identify OST, Knights Templars. You catch them in a suit, even you meet the gentlemen of Chad. So what's tricky about it is that if you look even at the Templars and their crusades, they shared a treaty with the Arabs and Muslims over Palestine for a period, and actually shared knowledge in terms of this secret society teaching. So the way that they operate, we as a military situation that we're seeing, in Cameroon, I knew that there were OST Knights Templar colonels, but not all of the military colonels and representatives will be Knights Templars. So this is how we'll see it now playing out in our current context today. And then you will have individuals who are in the military who are just totally unaligned. This is where now you see the conflict come in, because if you have a group of people who are aligned in Niger, Niger could have a coup where there was a colonel who was backed by France in OST, the Knights Templars, to seize power from a group that actually had taken over, that wasn't aligned to Knights Templar, that wanted to create a better situation. And then when we're looking at it outside, we would have to now be able to interpret whether the group is Knights Templar, or it's unaligned, or it's Masonry, or it's independent, or how is it functioning. But we know that from this descent of history through generation to generation and colonialism, and the founding of this organization being infused into the French military and political and banking system, there definitely is Knights Templarism in this current context of conflict we are seeing there in ECOWAS.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful explanation. I'd like to ask anybody with a question, but I think it's not a question. We want to actually put whatever has been presented into current context in Africa. So as you're trying to ask any question or raise any concern, kindly try to link it to the current situation. It's not about answering and rebattling, it's almost done, but we are more moving to put these issues into current context and what's the way forward. Sister Teresa?
Yes, sorry, I will ask a more appropriate question. Thank you for your answer, brother, before. It was perfect. I totally understood what you said. What you're saying is resonating with me as old money and new money. And the pivotal moment was when Notre Dame burnt down, and that was the battle between this old money and new money. And when the Qatars, the Knights Templar went underground and took the wealth with them, are we seeing now them dividing Africa between the old money and the new money families? Is that what we're seeing? And that's why it is not so clear for people who are looking at it just as a present, but need to go back hundreds and hundreds of years to see the stranding and the separating of those two powers. And can we bring that to the public so that people can understand that we have inside of Africa this kind of affiliation? Thank you.
Can I come in there? Sister Teresa, it appears you have very deep knowledge of these things, and I don't recall you wanting to share them with us. So what I would like you to do, Sister Teresa, is can you also prepare your own slides and share with us? Because clearly you understand a lot about these things. If that is okay with you, that is, yeah? Can you prepare something and share with us?
That's not a problem. I didn't know you were discussing this. I just saw the advert. But yeah, of course, no problem.
Yeah, well, we discuss everything that is to do with the unification of Africa. But yeah, you are right. It's only recently that we started discussing, having a conversation about the unification of Africa. That was on the promptings of Sister Ida, who raised the question. So yeah, but yeah, Sister Teresa, we are discussing these things, and we shall be pleased if you will come and share with us what you just mentioned about new money and old money, because this is new to me as well. Brother Fokwa, do you have anything to say about, I am not taking over your role, Brother Pigeon. I'm just coming in there briefly. But yeah, Brother Fokwa, anything to say about this new money, old money thing, so that we hear from others as well? Yeah, over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But I think in that, the folk need to bring it in light. Whether do you have a new scramble and partition of Africa again? Is there another new scramble that is going on and partition of Africa after the scramble and partition we came from? I know there's been these power struggles, so that we can also understand what's going on. Brother Fokwa?
Now, yes, my brother. You know, this is a very powerful. It's already taking us into the next slides that I've prepared for part 2, because when you start to follow the banking, like our sister was saying, that's when you start to see that, I mean, she was spot on, because the Medici family of Italy, I mean, the Rothschild, it goes to the money. Who's been funding these organizations all of these while? Each family in Europe, from the monarchies, they have their coat of arms. And in their coat of arms, it identifies certain symbols that will let you know which organization or order at times they're affiliated with, or which knighthood. And it's through the preservation of these monarchies and then their children and descendants into the banking networks that you can start to follow the money to the different orders. Like there's one popular French family called the Bourbons. They had a type of rivalry with Napoleon back during that period. So their family is still existing up until today.
Sorry, brother,
Yes.
brother, can I come in here?
Yes.
If you have prepared this for next week, then let's not continue this conversation.
Okay, okay.
Pick it up. Yeah, pick it up as a presentation as you did today for next week. Let us, for the rest of the time, Chair, let's focus on the current African situation and what is going on, and let's have that conversation about unification of Africa. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I also think that in line that the first part of this presentation, I don't think that it will be extensive enough to further discuss it further, because there are other parts that are coming for maybe in the next Saturday and the Saturday, and therefore discussing it further might make us get to another chapter that might come later. So we actually need to check on 2 aspects now on this presentation, focusing this presentation on the aspect of land and the aspect of enslavement, modern enslavement, or whatever the mission for enslavement. How do we relate it to the context today? Is there any other form of enslavement in the continent today? And how do we get ourselves out of it from the imperial powers? And if there's quest for land, do we have evidence of such land quest in Africa? Our land still being controlled by either the West or the East? And how do we organize ourselves to get out of this? Because actually the land of Africa is an issue, and our resources, and this modern context of enslavement and slavery. So therefore, the next people will have to give their, I will request that they give their concept in regards to this. These issues playing in Africa, where companies are owning our minerals, are getting out and everything else. What can you say in regards to that? That's why we want to start the presentation.
Chair, can I suggest, I think it's important we hear from those who are here, because there are a lot of people here. Let's hear from them as well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Let's start with King Capito. And because you are new to this class, King Capito.
Yes, brother. I hope you can hear me. I am King Capito from Malawi, and I am here to comment on the question that was raised, that are we experiencing another partition of Africa? In my opinion, the question has to be understood in the context of history, where Europe is coming from and where we also as Africans are coming from. Because if you look at the history of Europe as to how they started this whole imperialist campaign in 1500s, you notice that the campaign started because of Europe's need for expansion, to look for resources outside Europe, because Europe by its nature is a place of depravity, And when these guys started looking out of Europe for their own survival, then they started clashing. The Kingdom of Portugal and Spain, and it had to be the Roman Catholic Church that brought them together to split the world into 2 spheres of influence. The Eastern sphere of influence going to Portugal, and the second, the Western influence, sphere of influence going to Spain. And that's because other European nations rose and they got to do the business. That's how now you got the Berlin Conference, in which the doctrine of discovery, which is part of the papal bulls that were issued around then, had to be revisited, because new European nations had come in. And that's how you have the Berlin Conference, how to tear Africa apart to themselves. So you have new players that were not available at the beginning of this race for resources in the world, like say, for example, Britain, France that you've talked about, and even other nations that never colonized Africa, but they were signatories at the Berlin Conference, like you're talking about United States of America, Turkey, and Russia. Now, you understand from history that it is out of the Berlin Conference, their disagreements that led to the 2 world wars, and then to decolonize the old colonial powers had to give up their colonies in exchange for the reconstruction of Europe, the Marshall Plan. And through that period of decolonization, actually now you have the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union, clashing for the very same thing until Soviet Union clashed out in the late 80s and 90s, and you had America dominating as the superpower in the era of the so-called democracy. Up until now, new nations are challenging America, like say, for example, the resurgence of Russia and other players that were not available at the Berlin Conference. So I would like to believe that with the onslaught of Russia's activities, and you have got also other players like the Nubian players like China getting onto the scene, we might as well be experiencing another very important economic and political shift that will actually determine the course of direction in future. I think this is a very serious issue that has to be looked into because it follows the very same pattern that we have seen for the past 500 years. European powers coming together, redraw the laws, and then they fight, and then they come together to redraw the laws, and then it keeps going on and on and on and on. So to cut the story short, are we seeing another partition of Africa? Yes. And we don't know actually how it's going to pan out, but we can feel it that it's on the ground. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sister Lawrence, do you have anything to say? Sister Lawrence Bozet from Reunion Island, I think so.
No, I have nothing to say. I just listen the conversation and process, and I really appreciate the intervention of Pourquoi, and I'm listening the debate.
Okay, thank you, sister.
I'm listening the
sister.
debate.
Thank you. Welcome. That's our new sister from Reunion Island, and we are uniting the Africa from both the islands and the inland. So we are all that diverse. Mohamed Bello Umaru is your first time around. I would like you to either unmute yourself, say anything in regards to the presentation, and maybe also introduce yourself. Mohamed Bello Umaru. Okay. If you're not able, let's move to Sister Nyagudi. You've been here for some time. What do you take out of the presentation? What's your thinking? And maybe anything else you want to say? Sister Nyagudi? Yes, Sister Nyagudi, your hand is raised. Kindly unmute yourself and say something. Are you able to unmute yourself? Yes.
She has unmuted herself.
Hello, everyone. Just been listening in. Yeah, it's quite thought-provoking. So let me just say this is like my radio because I play it as I'm putting my baby to sleep. He just fell asleep now. So yeah, kindly allow me and thank you for this platform.
Oh, thank you. Say lullaby to the baby. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to Badama Fafa. Do you have anything to say in regards to this? I'm going through the list. Or anything you'd like to share with us in regards to the presentation? Yes.
Yes, leadership. I'm lately experiencing connectivity issues. I was following the presentation. It was a good presentation. Thanks to Brother Fokwa for presenting such. I think the issue of of religion and the revolution on how it links. One day it needs, as the Concism study group, we need to look at it, how religion relates to revolution, or as maybe we can also draw something from there, because the presentation touch a lot on religious beliefs. That's what my contribution can end here. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Sankara. Comrade Sankara, do you have anything to share with us in regards to the presentation, or how you can link it to the current? Comrade Thomas Sankara. Hello, comrade. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Okay. But if you're able,
Chef.
kindly just come in.
Yes, Comrade Thomas
Yes,
has unmuted.
Good evening, Chef.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good revolutionary greetings to all of you. I joined a bit late. I'm not sure if I missed the presentation, but from the discussions and inputs that were made, also by our chair, Mr. Comrade Kwame. From our side, or from my side, I think it's a very informative discussion. We really need to have that, and I would agree with the latter speakers that who have the view that we really also need to bring in solutions to Africa. We must be very radical. We must be unapologetic, because we are visionaries and we have a goal that we want to really achieve. So these systems that are here to rob from us should really be fought with everything that we really get. But in the main, not forgetting that we still have our people, we still have challenges that we are faced with of poverty, extreme poverty, unemployment, and inequalities that are there within Africa. So whatever that we do, we should really be strategic in ensuring that we liberate our people. So thank you very much for the informative discussion. Indeed, religion plays a very important role in it, because it can be that we think that we should not be empowered, or we should not be wealthy, that it's a crime to be wealthy, you know, as Africans. Whereas when you look at our counterparts, they're really going for a kill and taking from us to ensure that they became rich and richer and they control us. So we must be smarter than that. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for that. Comrade Ras Spala, comrade from also South Africa.
Yeah, just brief on my side. From the information you gather, I just want to add upon the Elder Wati's presentation. The last secret society we Africans had was around 5000 BCE. They were called the Shemzuho. These were the African priests and administrators in the Egyptian Empire who held the secret knowledge of the pyramids and all the energy fields surrounding the earth and its atmosphere. So anyway, my last point where I want to talk in terms of the current affairs. What's happening here in South Africa, just one point now, with the president of Malawi just arrived for the BRICS summit that will be starting on the 22nd up to the 24th here in South Africa. So there's a lot of things going on. And amidst that, there's this case of DA and EFF going on, where now DA wants to combine all other parties in South Africa, the 500 other parties, into one threshold so that they can stand a chance to win the elections against the EFF next year. So yeah, thank you. That's all I wanted to say for now.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us. I'd like to give this last opportunity to Brother Kwame to actually connect this presentation and also share critical information in our mission and what is our regard to our vision as a class. So Brother Kwame, kindly take this opportunity to share with us as we bring this meeting to an end. Brother Kwame, can you hear me?
Yes, brother. Brother Pigeon, I would suggest that you do what you just asked me to do. All I will say before you do that is to thank everyone for coming and for sharing with us. No doubt today's meeting has been, what we've been hearing has just powerful. And I'm just elated that our sister like Sister Teresa also seem to have a lot of knowledge about these things, and she will be, as you said, she's prepared to share with us. So yeah, it's been powerful, and we can see the links. And one of the things that has come up in the presentation, the question of land and resources. And I just want to leave this with us before Brother Pigeon ends the whole thing. And that is that let's always remember that when they took the land and the resources, they went to Europe with title deeds, yeah, and said that, for instance, I am now the owner of this vast land in Southern Africa, or South Africa, or Lesotho, or Ghana, or whatever. Question: where are those documents now? When we got our independence back, were those title deeds returned to us as the owners of Africa? If not, where are those documents? Because for all we know, those documents are still being used to trade secretly amongst themselves as to who owns what, who should take what, and so on. Where are those documents? And I will just end there with that question. Brother Pigeon, over to you to say what you asked me to do and then to end the meeting. But just want to thank you all for coming.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Kwame, for that. To either wrap up this session for today, I'd like to end it with one thing to define our mission here. Kwame Nkrumah, in his book Neocolonialism, under the subtopic Mechanisms of Neocolonialism, on page 127, he says that in order to halt foreign influence in the affairs of developing countries, it is important to study, understand, expose, and actively combat neocolonialism in whatever guise it may appear. It is our intention as a class to study. What we do, we are studying these tactics of neocolonialism in order to understand them, to expose them, and to actively combat neocolonialism. This is the sole intention of this class. Once we know we are able to understand them, we are able to expose them and actively combat them, then we can actually find our roadway towards the unification of Africa. Kwame Nkrumah also do say that for the methods of neocolonialism are subtle and varied. As you can see, they are varied. It's either in the spiritual angle, in the political angle, in the economical angle. These methods are varied. They all not only operate in economical field, but also political, religious, ideological, and cultural spheres. So today's presentation was in regards on how do they connect their religious connection to the political angle, so that we can understand how they control us through the religion and politics. So this is what we do every Saturday. We study the unification of Africa for the purpose of totally unifying Africa and totally liberating Africa, and for also developing Africa. And in order to do this, we must have this study. We do serious research and thinking. We don't just share rumors here. If you have a task to present something for us in regards to the unification and liberation of Africa, you're free to do your research. On Thursdays, we study our book, Consciousism, every time of 1900 plus GMT, or plus 1 GMT, so that we can also understand the philosophy and ideology. And it's out of that study that we bring these topics for the Saturday discussion in order to unify and liberate Africa. So I want to end it here by appreciating all of you and looking forward to this presentation. Next Saturday, we might also have a presentation from Swaziland. We'll decide that, but we are looking forward to have this part 1, part 2, part 3 from Brother Fokwa, so that we fully understand how religion is connecting with our politics. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I think I'll end the recording here, and now we can either take it back to